Good evening and welcome to the Sound Off Show. My name is Linda Kirker. I'm the host of the program and I'm so glad you joined us tonight. I think you're going to be really glad you joined us tonight as well. During these very difficult times with the COVID going on and so many people isolated, and unable to go to work, and children at home instead of at school. So many challenges for us all. And so we need a little bit of laughter, a little bit of adventure, a little bit of diversion. And so we're going to probably be providing that for you tonight. You can be the decision maker on that, but I think you're going to agree with me that there's a lot of really good information that's going to be shared with you tonight. We're on a Vermont adventure, and I'm kind of excited. This is a different type of show than that I have provided before, and I'll be interested in having you call in. The phone number periodically is up on the screen, and if you're inclined to want to call in and pose a question or make a comment, we'd love to hear from you. And with that, I'm going to introduce my guest. He's a first-timer on the Sound Off Show. His name is Jeremy Read. Welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
It's great to have you on the program, and I think you're going to be bringing a really great opportunity to people tonight with all the knowledge that you have about the state of Vermont and the history of the state. And I was, when we met to talk about this, I was kind of joyously overwhelmed with how much you know about this, the history of the state of Vermont. And I didn't grow up here. I grew up in New Jersey and came up to the university as a teenager. And so I really don't have a perspective until you came along. So I'm thinking that maybe even people who grew up here may not know what you're going to be offering tonight. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you, who you are, what you've done with your life, and so forth.
Well, I want to thank you. What we're going to talk about tonight is I put together last several years calendars, simple 12-month, 13-month calendars, and what I've tried to do is take pictures of various communities throughout the state. I've done this the last couple of years, and on previous calendars, when you could travel more out of state and so forth, I've done some things that might be across the country, and even a couple. I had an opportunity to travel to England as well as Norway 6-7 years ago, and I was able to take some pictures of that. So
that's great.
I'm not a native of Vermont, but I've been here 34 years. I'm recently retired from the newspaper business, the St. Albans Messenger specifically, roughly a year ago or so. I've been in the newspaper business for 45 years.
Wow.
And as a matter of fact, my last stop was in Auburn, California, which is not far from some historical information back there. And I started in the career 45 years ago in Colorado.
That's a lot of experience.
Yes, yes. I have a somewhat of a pretty good camera, but I'm not a
professional
professional photographer by any means. I'm modest in that respect, but at the same time, I think I have a good idea of when a good shot can be made. So.
I think you do.
Thank you.
Yes, you have some great photos.
Thank you.
And folks, Jeremy doesn't know I was going to say this. I just thought of it. But Jeremy puts these calendars together, and it's a great trip. It's a historical, educational trip about our state. And it's a great calendar. You're going to see some of the photos tonight on your screen. And there's a little story about some history about each photo. So these are available. They're for sale. Should you be interested at some time, I'm sorry I didn't tell you I was going to say this, but it's worth what you would pay for it, believe me. And to educate your children and to talk about these photos in a family gathering, I think would be a lot of fun. So we'll tell folks how to reach you in case they're interested. But please go on and tell us a little bit more. How did you get interested in history?
Well, I think it's partly that I've moved around the country quite a bit. I've been in the Midwest. I was born in London, England. My father's English. I think there's a lot of history with that in itself. And my mother's was from Minnesota, Minneapolis. I have a Norwegian ancestry, so there's that aspect of it.
Me too.
And I've traveled around and so forth, and it just I had a wonderful 8th grade history teacher
Me too.
that inspired me when I was going to school in suburban Detroit, Michigan. And he told all about the Fort Ticonderoga and the Revolutionary War at Saratoga and so forth, and a fellow named Johnny Burgoyne that was the British commander there. And I found out later that he was buried at Westminster Abbey in London. So anyway, but that really inspired me. I think it helped that teacher was a member of the Michigan University baseball team, so that I love baseball, so I got a kick out of that. So I think that helped me to stay focused with what he was saying.
Yeah, and you felt a connection with
That's
him.
right. That's right.
It's amazing what that will do.
Yeah.
A common denominator between two people.
Right, and then I had an uncle, I'm sorry, he passed away. He was a baseball coach, player, and so forth, and he knew everything about every baseball player there was, and he could almost put you to sleep with the amount of information he would tell you about baseball players through the years. So anyway.
Well, it's nice that you could share that interest.
Yes.
That's really great. So when did you start taking the photos and deciding to create an educational calendar, really?
Well, I think it was partly, yes, I've done some traveling and so forth, and as I said, we've been kind of stationary here in Vermont the last couple of years, but I've got friends from around the country, and we've gotten together for whether it be skiing or whether it be rendezvous of some sort and different locales, and so it's kind of exciting to put together a bunch of photos, and hey, how do I showcase this? And I thought, why not put it in a calendar, 12 or 13 photos of mine, put a little history of it or some information about it, and give it away at Christmas time.
Sure. Yeah. What a great gift.
Yeah. So.
Well, I love it, and I'm just amazed by the stories that you told me when we got together to talk about this. It's really a great gift.
Well, you had mentioned, you asked me about my interest in history. I might also add that I went to, it's now a co-ed college, but I went to a men's college in Missouri, and Westminster College, Fulton, Missouri. It's in the middle of the state there. And this is where Winston Churchill gave his famous Iron Curtain speech.
Okay.
In 1947, Harry Truman invited him to give a speech there. And that speech is probably one of the dominant speeches that sort of laid out the fact that we've got to pay attention to the Soviet Union after World War II. Even though we've won the war with the Soviet Union's help, we need to pay attention to what the, at that time it was Stalin still in power, what are we going to do with that was that
Regime.
power in itself.
A little bit of a warning, yeah.
And I think you could see NATO coming about because of that. Truman was effective in putting together that, NATO with European powers and so forth. And of course, the United Nations just started then. Some people feel as if World War II may have been eliminated if we didn't have, if we had something like the United Nations formed right after World War I, but that never came about. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's world history, there's U.S. history,
That's
there's Vermont history, there's individual history.
Well, I think also it's you look at what I respect about Vermont is its independent nature, and I think sometimes that that can be a criticism, but at the same time. The history of Vermont was, maybe people don't realize this, but it was, for 14 years, it was a separate entity before it became the 14th state. Ethan Allen was battling, not only, he was arguing with New York State. New York State was taking advantage of Vermont territory. Finally he was even at that point, even considering joining Britain, which was, of course, in the Quebec area or all of Canada then. And the irony is that Ethan Allen was a prisoner of war in London at the outset of the Revolution. So it's interesting that he was considering, after being held prisoner in London, wow, maybe I should join. Vermont should join Britain, So there was that kind of argument between New York and maybe even sign up with Britain, as I said. So
well, it was this newfound nation trying to find itself, trying to figure out, for all parties concerned, what's the best approach here. And how do we do it?
And I think the personality of some of these individuals that I outlined in this calendar, I mean, that's not to say that other states do not have independent natures and its advancements by any means. I lived in Michigan, of course, so you've got the auto industry. It's amazing what Henry Ford did and so forth. And all those entrepreneurs in the automotive industry. So Vermont had a number of independent people. That John Deere Tractor Company, he came from Vermont, and he moved to the Midwest and so forth and started out building a plow, and then he went off and developed the John Deere tractor system.
As you say that, it occurs to me, and it's probably what you're really saying, is that all of these entrepreneurs through our history have had such an impact on jobs and money and products, all kinds of goods and services. Really interesting.
Yeah. A little bit of the beer industry, the microbrewery industry. We have a brewery in Vermont that's rated #1 in the world. How on earth you rate 3,000 breweries and make this #1? I don't really know, but that's in Green Barrel Bend. In the Northeast Kingdom over there.
Is it Greensboro?
Greensboro.
Greensboro.
Yeah, Greensboro, yeah.
Really? What is the name of it? Do you know?
The name of it, I have it, Hills Farm, here we are. It's Hill Farmstead Brewery. And it's rated like the #1. Now, recently, its publicity's come out. They're going to be closing down here for the next 6 months or so. But they are rated #1 microbrewery in the world or so.
So nobody's drinking much beer these days?
Well, I don't know. I think this pandemic has kind of caused lack of people traveling,
That's true.
to Vermont to drink
That's
this beer. So, anyway.
Would you like to share more before we get into this the cover?
Well, no, I think we could certainly go into the calendar if you like. So
You know what stunned me when we met yesterday is that there are so many well-known American historical figures that we know the names of, but I had no idea that they had a connection to the state of Vermont. It's just awesome.
Yeah.
So we're going to hear
Yeah.
more about that as you give your...
Well, again, I think it's the independent spirit, and but again, you could probably you can certainly go to other states and you find a certain amount of independence there, of course, wherever you might go. But I think it really is. Some people might be quite amazed about the
As we
certain
delve-
individuals that have come out of Vermont and so forth.
Yeah. So you want to start with the cover?
Well, yeah, the cover, I put this together, and this is Isle Lamont, and some people might want, well, why is it a French name? And of course, Samuel de Champlain, of course, we have a lake named after him, but
Right.
he came down in 1609, and this is one of the islands that he touched base on, and after him was a fellow named Pierre Lamont, and he came down and set up a fort on the island, Fort St. Anne, and of course he was dealing with the native tribes then, not the Americans, or excuse me, the British at that point, but and then to this day you have the St. Anne Shrine.
Yes.
So on that same site where the St. Anne Shrine was this fort. And this fort came in 55 years after Samuel de Champlain's discovery of arrival of 1609. So
We're going back back into the 1600s in
Right.
Vermont.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's a little bit before my time. Some people might think I was around that long. No. So I have a question because
Sure.
I don't really, like Isle Lamont is really not an island, is it?
Oh, yes, it is.
It's an island.
Yes,
It's
Isle
not
Lamont.
a peninsula.
It is an island. It's got a bridge to it, of course. You can drive to it and so forth.
Okay, I guess I have to
But,
get over there sometime.
Yeah, I go.
Are you giving tours?
Sure, I'll give you a tour. So it used to have there's a marker there that shows that there's they had a ferry at one point before the bridge, of course. Well, excuse me, they had you got it from Isle Lamont, you can't take a bridge to New York, but at one point they had a ferry about, maybe the turn of the century, 1900 or so. And Theodore Roosevelt came over there and gave a speech.
Wow.
And unfortunately, he found out that the president before him died, and I can't remember the president that he replaced, but he found out there that he had to be sworn in as the next president of the United States.
While he was
While
in
he was in
Isle
Isle
Lamont,
Lamont, yes.
he found out that his predecessor had passed away.
Right.
Oh my goodness!
Right.
Wow.
So he came over on there's a marker there, but indicating that it was a ferry service between New York and Isle Lamont. So
Okay. And there was a French military post there
that's
as
correct.
well.
Right.
At Fort St. Anne.
That's correct. Yeah.
Who would have guessed? Not I. So to defend against the native tribe.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
And St. Anne Shrine, as you mentioned, is there. I've been there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite a display, very well outlined, and they have services
Yes.
periodically. I think
Yes.
it used to be 3 or 4 services a week, but now they're just down to 1. I think partly because of the COVID issue, so.
Wow, that's amazing.
Mhm.
And it's a beautiful picture that you took, too.
Thank you.
Now, I do have one last question. Now,
Mm-hmm.
is this New York?
Yeah, this is, that's the view looking west, and that would be the New York landscape on the other side of there.
Now-
There is a quote in there. I put a quote in there. What I like to do on these calendars is come up with quotes, and I think this is ideal about history. If history were taught in the form of stories, it would never be forgotten. And this was by Rudyard Kipling.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Rudyard Kipling, we'll talk about that later, but he also came to Vermont for a period of time. So.
Stories help you to remember.
That's right.
Make it meaningful.
Right.
It's not just a fact thrown
Just a
at you.
fact, no.
It has a story behind
Exactly.
it. And I agree with Rudyard Kipling. He'd be happy to know I agree with him, I'm sure. I have to laugh. I mean, these are tough times, and if you can laugh, laugh.
Sure.
Okay, so how about January?
All right. Well, we've had 2 presidents coming from Vermont, and the first was Calvin Coolidge.
Yeah, good old Cal.
Now, unfortunately, both these presidents became presidents because they were vice presidents, and the president had passed away in office, and then they took over, and Calvin Coolidge took over for Warren Harding. We're in this COVID issue and this issue right now in America and across the world. Calvin Coolidge came in the 1920s, and in the 1918 we had the flu epidemic, and we got out of that, and the country, as they like to say, roared in the Roaring '20s. And he would meet and entertain the likes of Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Harvey Firestone, and he even had an opportunity to get down to Yankee Stadium and meet up with Babe Ruth with his talent. He's also noted as he was the only president to be born on July 4th.
Oh.
As I said, there's a lot of firsts with him. First president from Vermont, as I mentioned. He's the first to give a speech on radio. Okay.
Wow.
And he was first to be sworn in by his father. So, in other words, when he found out that Warren Harding had passed away, he was at his home in Plymouth Notch, which is a wonderful spot. I recommend anybody to visit that. It's just a wonderful area. It's where he was born, where he was educated, where he lived, where he even worked for a bit. And then, as I said, he was sworn in by his father when he was down there for a visit. And then he also assigned the first woman to the federal judiciary.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So the first time a woman had an opportunity to serve in
Now
he was called Silent Cal, but until 2006 he scheduled the most news conferences.
Oh, let's see. Who was there in 2006?
Anyway, but
And now the photo was of the family home?
this is the family home, yes.
In Plymouth Notch,
In Plymouth
Vermont.
Notch. And then, as I said, across the street is where he went to school. And he was, they love to say, as they say, he was somewhat modest or as they say, Silent Cal. But he also addressed African-American students at Howard University and complimented on their advancement.
Oh, that's great.
He also granted citizen rights to the Native Americans.
Interesting.
So his wife entertained at the White House with several pets, one of which was a raccoon.
Oh, boy, that must have been entertaining. Oh, dear.
Anyway,
You don't want to leave any of your dinner around.
I know.
Oh, dear. That's cute. Yeah, everybody has a story.
Yeah.
But these public figures, especially, someone like Calvin Coolidge, the leadership in the country, it's just fascinating to hear all these things and to read these things in your calendar.
Yeah.
And then, I was thinking if I were going through these photos and reading what you've written, I could look him up on the computer and then even, get a complete story. More
Sure.
back,
Sure.
You've done a great job in filling in the important things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just
Yeah.
to even get a better understanding of him and Vermont and so forth. This is great. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Our Cal, and he was our only president, right?
Well, no. After him was Chester Arthur.
Oh, Chester A. Arthur.
From Franklin County.
Oh, goodness.
Chester Arthur was born in Franklin County, although he moved off to New York State after that. But he was our second president out of Vermont.
Do you have him in here?
No, I don't.
Next calendar.
Next calendar, right?
Yes. Chester A. Arthur. Yeah. I don't know a whole lot about him.
Well, he, again, I don't have the bio on him necessarily. He moved off to New York State, and he worked in sort of immigration and so forth for a period of time. And he, he was, I'll talk about him a little later.
Okay.
And I can bring that up on a
Sure.
topic there. So.
Yeah, I think it's time. We've only had 2 presidents, so I think it's time for Vermont to bring up a president. I have no clue who that might be.
Well,
Are you
one time we were
interested?
looking at Howard Dean there for, until he screamed in the camera, and that was that. But anyway.
Are you interested? Oh, dear. In today's world, who would want it, right?
Yeah.
Although we need some really great people to run, that's for sure.
Sure.
Okay, so we were going to go from 1 to 2. How about that?
Yeah.
All right, so we have here Ferrisburg, Vermont. Am I in the wrong place?
Well, we can talk about that. Yeah. Ferrisburg, here you are. Vermont was came into the Union as a non-slave state. Okay.
Because we were more north, right?
And, well, yeah, I mean, but slavery was everywhere else except for Vermont. Okay. So there was a fella named Frederick Douglass. He was quite an orator, quite a
Speaker, huh?
speaker and so forth.
1818.
He came out of Maryland, escaped slavery, and he came up to Massachusetts and New York at the age of 20. Now, this was roughly, I'd say probably 1838 or so when he escaped and so forth. But and he put in a quote here in one of his speeches. He became, as I said, he was quite an orator, and he said, "I have been a slave, and I am still a slave. There is not a foot of land under the stars and stripes of America where I can stand as a free man. Much of you who boast of your freedom and republicanism in the state of Vermont, high as your hills, deep as your valleys, there is not an inch of yard in all your state where Frederick Douglass can stand free."
Now, why we didn't have slavery here, right?
Well, Well, he was considering himself still a slave. I mean, he was a fugitive, you know. He just didn't feel, you know, liberated necessarily wherever he was.
But the people of Vermont were not making him a slave.
No.
But that's what it sounded like.
Well, he felt.
That was his calling to be a slave?
No. He felt he was on the run. He was escaping slavery, okay? He could possibly be, the Underground Railroad came through Vermont. The Underground Railroad came through Michigan. The Underground, all the northern states, right along the Canadian border, where a lot of course, fugitive slaves ran, and basically the Underground Railroad is the term for them escaping slavery from wherever state, when it might have been the South, of course, and heading primarily to Canada. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, he was a black man,
Yes,
right?
he was.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, so he felt he was, because he had been a slave in the
He
South.
just felt like he was always on the run. He was always concerned that he'd be arrested or brought back to, Maryland, where he was from.
Okay. That's sad. Okay. Is that it for that one?
Sure.
Okay,
I
let's.
thought we'd talk about Rudyard Kipling in April there. So.
Well, I have March down here, but that's all right. Oh, no, I'm sorry. April. Linda, get your month straight.
Well,
Dummerston.
Dummerston is outside of Brattleboro, just a very small community, and Rudyard Kipling, he was born in India, and it just shows you that Britain was, he was British, of course, and his father had businesses and so forth in India, and Rudyard used to do some writing for newspapers there. And it's amazing how much travel they would do, and you'd see this also, whether it be South Africa or some of the amazing colonies, basically, that England had, and where these people would travel to. So he would come back to England. He came back to England, Rudyard did, and he was working with his future wife's brother. And he was a sort of assistant writer with him. And unfortunately, this fellow passed away, this writer, this co-writer, and he sort of immediately took up with his, this brother's sister, and she was from New York State. And they were going to travel to India again, and they elected instead to come to Vermont, and so they took up residence and built a home in Dummerston, Vermont. You might want to show that.
Yeah, that's quite a unique-looking building.
This is in the National Registry now, and you can actually lease this building. The public can. This building was built roughly in 1902 or so. And when they spent 4 years, Rudyard Kipling spent 4 years in Vermont, and he built this home. And his wife and his firstborn stayed there. And at age 28, he would sit in his study there, and he wrote the children's books, the Jungle Books.
Yes.
And that's kind of one of the considered one of the best publications put out at that time. He spent 4 years there, and he rivaled Charles Dickens, of course, the famous English author, with his notoriety then. And he received so much mail there that he pressured the postal service to have the mail delivered, or he set up a postal office in his actual home there, and he was getting up to 200 letters a day.
Sounds like my email.
So he gained his own post office, and he after an argument with the rest of the family there, they moved back to England. But he gained the first Nobel Prize in Literature, or English language recipient, and the first Nobel Prize in Literature in 1907. And he would pass away in 1937 and be buried at Westminster Abbey in London.
So he wasn't very old, was he?
Well, he, no, he wasn't. I'd say he was probably, I'd say he was 28 when he was at in Vermont,
Dummerston,
and then
yeah.
he might have been 55 or so when he passed away. As I said, you can lease this home if you wish. It's a National Historic Landmark.
Now, leasing it as a residence?
You or I could lease this if you want to, stay there for a period of time. So,
Okay, as a home.
as a home,
Not
yeah.
as an entertainment place.
No.
That looks like it's pretty darn big.
Yeah, it is.
So
Yeah, it
you
is.
could take, if you have 12 children,
I know.
oh, gosh.
No. So there's some notoriety with one of the best authors in the world at that time. So
You know what? You mentioned the Jungle Book.
Mm-hmm.
I have some old books. No, really,
Yeah.
they weren't mine. They came through the family.
yeah,
And I think I might have one of those if I kept it. I'll have to check that out in my basement.
sure.
Be interesting. Okay, so he went back to England, huh?
That's right.
Okay. Well, we had him for a while.
That's right.
Now we were going to do July,
Yes.
unless there's something in between.
Well, I don't know if people are aware of this. I think we didn't mention this, but we could probably cover. June if you wish.
I have it right in front of
In
me.
Sharon, Vermont, Joseph Smith is credited with starting the Mormon Church.
Yes.
People
Yep.
may not be aware of this, but the Mormon Church actually was started in Vermont, and of course, eventually, Brigham Young was also born in Vermont, Brigham Young, and eventually, unfortunately, Joseph Smith was killed shortly after he started he wrote the Book of Mormon. He wrote the Book of Mormon at only the age of 22, and then he became the first president of the Mormon Church.
Do you think that his religious affiliation had anything to do with his being killed?
Yes. I think he was.
That's
He was
sad.
jailed, and then he was. There was an anti-Mormon fervor, so to speak, and unfortunately, he was killed because of that. And Brigham Young basically picked up, and this was in Illinois where he was killed. And then Brigham Young basically followed him and picked up his inspiration, and he became the second president of the church, and of course took his followers to Utah.
Oh, here we go. He would be jailed and then killed by a mob with anti-Mormon fervor.
Mm-hmm.
What a shame.
Yeah. What is in Sharon, Vermont is a historical museum and so forth, and so you could visit that.
It's
So,
lovely.
yeah.
It's impressive looking.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Makes me think of the house that I grew up in, just the white house.
Yeah.
Not this big,
Sure.
big long place.
Sure.
No, with a steeple. No, we didn't have that. Oh, dear. I can't help myself. Okay. Well, okay. So Brigham Young, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've heard that name before.
Yeah.
Anything else on that one?
Well, no, we could go on to July here.
I have one quick question
Sure,
first.
sure.
Where is Sharon, Vermont?
Okay. It's definitely it's outside of Brattleboro, the northeast corner of the state there. So it's a little further west than Brattleboro there.
I should have brought a map. Okay, I need to travel the state
Sure,
more,
you do.
I think.
You do.
I
You
go to
do.
Burlington and back.
Yeah, you do.
Okay, all right, so you wanted to skip over to July. Oh, look at that. My town, Georgia, Vermont.
Yeah, we're on to,
Whoops.
whoops, we got Brandon. We need to go to July.
We'll get there. We get our wonderful guy behind the counter over there to find us in July.
Well, we want to talk about George Standard, and of course, he was from Georgia, just down the road here. They have a new exhibit. He was born in Georgia, and there's a monument just on Highway 7, just to the south of the town hall there. And now Milton, on their main thoroughfare on the south end there, they now have a new exhibit of for him, Standard.
We'll have to take a tour someday.
And they named a town after Standard I'd say in the 1870s or so, and that's in the that's in the northeast part of Vermont.
Northeast Kingdom?
Not quite. It's probably not quite that far north. I can't remember the county, but there's a town named after it. It's not much. There's only 270 people in the community.
Oh, my.
So,
Wow.
but anyway, what is General Standard's claim to fame? By the way, he used to work at the St. Albans Foundry in St. Albans, which we have a sign for. It used to be a restaurant, of course, Foundry
The
Restaurant.
old foundry,
The old
right
Foundry.
on the corner.
He used to work there, that prior to the war. He was the first Vermonter to volunteer from Vermont for the Union cause, for Abraham Lincoln's effort. And then he rose through the ranks, became a major general, and then was injured 2 or 3 times, and then
boy.
he was even injured at Gettysburg. And he's credited with battling Pickett. Pickett was from Virginia, and on the 3rd day of the battle, it was a 3-day battle, and Pickett sent a charge against the Union forces, and Standard sent Vermont troops to one sort of corner of this offensive, and it helped beat back the charge, and he's credited with helping stop that charge, and the Confederates did not win the battle. It became a sort of a tie, so to speak, between the Union and Confederate
Made a big
forces.
difference what he did.
Confederate forces. It definitely did. And I put in a quote here of
General
there was a
Doubleday.
General Abner Doubleday, who some people feel was responsible for starting baseball in America. And he has a quote here, and he was very complimentary of Standard. I can only say that the Vermont Brigade, performed the most brilliant feat during the war, for they broke the desperate charge of Pickett, saving the day, and deferred it to the whole North from invasion and
That's
devastation.
Vermont for you.
There you are. There you are.
Good for him.
Of course, Abraham Lincoln was upset that, there wasn't a Union victory out of it. Lee was able to retreat and head back to
After
to
that,
Virginia after that, yeah. So,
any chance we can just get a quick picture of July? I think he's working on it. Anyway, we don't have a caller, right? No, okay. All right, we can move along. Let's see, it's good old September.
Well, if you, Stratford is a community in Vermont that's not far from Sharon. It's a little further west, but it's in the southern part of the state. And here he's got this shot here. This is quite a state here. What I wasn't able to shoot I shot the home and so forth. But then there's a big barn in the back, and it's quite well preserved. And you wonder, okay, who is Justin Morrill? Well, he helped put in what they call the Land Grant College Act, and this is basically where states could buy federal land, and that would help put in colleges throughout America. So in other words, Iowa State University in 1862 became the first land grant college in America. Vermont University was also a land grant. Michigan State University was a land grant. There was 105 of them that went in across America.
So the federal government purchased land for...
Well, no, the states would buy, the federal government would sell land to states, and they would be able to put colleges on it or that sort of thing. So this federal government made money on it, but if you can well imagine, maybe it was some kind of a discount of some sort, but this really put in, why do we have these certain universities across America? Well, it's because of all these colleges that were put in. Justin Morrill was the son of a blacksmith, and he was unable to afford college. But he was credited with starting the Republican Party out of Vermont, as well as with his partner Jacob Merritt Howard out of Vermont. And the two of them helped form the Republican Party. They weren't happy with the Whig Party, and they formed the Republican Party. And of course, Abraham Lincoln became the first president or even candidate from the Republican Party. And Morrill spent 44 years in the Vermont, representing Vermont in the U.S. House of Representatives, as well as the U.S. Senate. And as I said, he put in this Land Grant College Act. And the act is still in place. And right in the 90s, you now have Native American colleges that have taken advantage of this. And you have colleges in Alaska and North Dakota and Montana that are and maybe even Arizona that are Native American colleges, and they take advantage of this Land Grant Act.
But the federal government doesn't own all the land.
Well, they own the land. You own the land, but the state would buy the land from the federal government.
During those days?
And then you put in your college, and Iowa State University and Ames or...
Well, thankfully, the federal government doesn't own the land anymore, right?
No.
Good.
No. This home is quite something, as I said, and they had a porch there. You might get a kick out of this. He would sit on the porch with the family on that porch, and they had a pet dog named Trump.
Go Trump. Oh, that's great. I like it.
Anyway, but it's a beautiful estate down there, and I'd recommend anybody to just travel down there. You'd have to get the schedule. I'm sure you can tour the home itself. So.
Wow. I'd have to bring your calendar with me.
Sure.
So I would have a little bit of history.
Sure.
Interesting. Okay, so let's see. We'll go to November.
Sure.
Oh, just one quick little thing. We didn't mention this to our technician, and we may not need a picture, but I never knew that the first color photo lab was in Burlington, Vermont.
Yes, this was written up in the Burlington Free Press not long ago, and there was these French pioneers called the Lamour brothers, and they were out of Lyon, France.
Yes.
And
Lumiere, which has to do with light.
Yeah, Lumiere. Yes, you pronounce it better than I have. And they came to America with the hopes of putting in a color lab here of so. And this very facility, which is now the Vermont Hardware in Burlington, it's off of Pine Street there, was the lab. Now, this was set up in 1904, and these gentlemen came here and set up this color lab campus, and it's the first place in America that they developed color prints and then eventually color film.
Wow.
Now, this was, of course, they had facilities in Lyon, France. You still have this structure standing here, but the facilities that they have in Lyon, France are long gone because they were taken apart by 2 world wars. So,
yeah. Well, I think it's interesting, from...
I might add, they beat Kodak to the market by 35 years with their color film. So,
Good for them.
Yeah.
Good for them. Okay, now we'll switch to November.
November.
Oh, this is an interesting story.
Yeah. That's December there, but we can go to November.
He'll get there.
Okay.
Burton Snowboards.
Yes, that is quite an entrepreneur, a fella that was quite.
There you go.
There we go. Burton Snowboard was it was a fella named Jake Burton, and unfortunately he passed away in 2019. He started out as a skier, and I know this. He tried to make the University of Colorado ski team, and unfortunately he was injured and he couldn't continue skiing with that in the college ranks. So he elected to move back to Vermont, and he there was already a somewhat of a snowboard that was tentatively used of some sort. He didn't invent it necessarily, but snowboard is something that is individuals would put both feet on their board. They wouldn't have two skis as you typically do with two poles.
2 poles, yeah.
You're going to go down just with both feet on one board.
Using your legs.
Yeah. So he's got in his garage in Londonderry, Vermont, and he developed this board, and he had from his grandmother, he got $150,000 in 1997.
Well, that's a problem.
And he put this investment, he put this investment to work, and he eventually created this board, and he basically created making these boards in Vermont, and then he eventually set out and he put together more than 4,000 worldwide outlets selling Burton snowboards.
1977.
He started that, and at that time, even the ski areas were not allowing snowboarders on the hill, but eventually, of course, you're allowed that now, but they were obviously very, I guess, cocky. They just wanted skiers and no snowboarders. So he had to convince ski areas as well. And
yeah, it took a while.
But it was sort of a rebellious thing against skiers to do snowboards.
Well, it's an alternative.
Yeah. And he had over 1,500 outlets in America.
Wow.
And this particular photo that I put up here was the Burton Snowboard outlet in San Francisco.
Wow. And
It
there-
became Olympic sport in 1998, and
In Japan.
in Japan. Yeah.
I can read.
His wife continues the enterprise to this day, with his,
All over
with-
the country.
Well, right, and I think they don't manufacture the boards in Vermont anymore. I think they manufacture them elsewhere, but the headquarters is still in Vermont. So
You wrote here, manufacturing his boards in Vermont with over 4,000 worldwide outlets. Wow.
Yeah.
Including over 1,500 in the USA.
Right.
That's amazing.
yeah,
As you
yeah.
were saying earlier about entrepreneurs in this
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
Wow. Think of the jobs and then the people who have enjoyed these.
Well, plus imagine the more volume you have on a ski area. You've got more people wanting to get out on a ski slope instead of just skiing. You've got another alternative.
And and not everybody wants to do the same thing.
Right.
I used to ski
Yeah.
at the poles.
Sure.
I never was on a snowboard.
No, I ski, but to this day I ski, but I've never been on a snowboard. So
No,
anyway.
but it might be interesting. You could bend your knee. Good for the leg muscles.
yeah.
Leave it to me. Okay. Well, that's really interesting. Londonderry, Vermont. Jake Burton.
Now
Oh.
that's way south. That's way south. That's almost in the center of the state, at the bottom of the state. So.
And he was named to the Vermont Sports Hall of Fame.
That's right. That's right.
Wow. Okay. And last but not least, we have 3 minutes to go.
Okay, 3 minutes to go. Well,
Stowe, Vermont.
I don't know. I'm sure many Americans have seen the movie Sound of Music.
Oh, yes.
And I remember seeing this with my family and so forth, and it came out in 1965. And it's you even before this past Christmas, you could see it on the TV, showing Julie Andrews putting Sound of Music. Well, it's all about the Von Trapp family.
Yes.
And they are based in Stowe, Vermont. And Marie Von Trapp she was a stepmother and a family matriarch, and she took her family and escaped occupied Austria in World War II.
Nazi-occupied
Austria, and fled to America. And as I said, The Sound of Music is based on her story, but there was other Broadway musicals. There was a West Berlin film. So her story is quite
Impressive, isn't it?
quite presented over the
Yeah, and they
years.
settled in Stowe, Vermont.
And they settled in Stowe.
That's interesting.
And it's quite an enterprise up there.
Oh, yes.
It has a cross-country skiing and involvement, as well as timeshares, restaurant, hotel, and a brewery. So
They covered the bases.
that's right.
Well,
That's right.
this is phenomenal, this calendar.
Well, on my back page, I know we just
yeah.
have we just
There's
have
you.
I took a picture of myself here, and we have a picture of Ben Franklin, or I should say a statue, not a picture. And this is the old post office in Washington, D.C. It's now the Trump Hotel.
Yes, I've been
And I
there.
want to bring up Franklin because this county is named Franklin after Ben Franklin, and he dealt with an individual called the Count of Vergennes to help get the French into the Revolution, the American Revolution. And with that help, it was successful that we won the Revolution. Vergennes, Vermont is named after that count, that Benjamin Franklin.
Fascinating. Well, listen, we're down to 35 seconds. By the way, I just told a fib. I've been to this Trump Hotel in New York, not Washington. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much for this adventure.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
folks, just find out where to reach Jeremy Read in St. Albans. Look him up in the phone book, I guess, if you want a copy of this, or to buy several of them and give them away for gifts. Thank you so much again. This was an adventure. I loved it.
Thank you.
God bless you, and thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
Take
All right.
care.
Take care.
Good night, folks.
Good night.
I'll see you again next week. Have a good one in between. Good night.